The other day, Dominic and I, in our separate homes, because we don't live together.
No, we don't.
Sat down and watched a brand new film called A Complete Unknown about the life of Mr. Bob Dylan. It stars Mr. Ed Norton, and Mr. Ed Norton joins us in the studio. Good morning, Ed.
Yeah. Good morning, Ed.
You're not feeling well.
No, I'm all right. I feel fine. I just sound a bit,
I think your voice is a good voiceover voice, that.
It's sort of making me sound like, a character on The Office. Who's that guy? What's the big guy?
Sort of.
Glenn.
What?
Who's the big guy on The Office? Glenn? Isn't this?
Oh, yeah, the big guy. Yeah, on the UK office.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right, yes.
See, now I prefer the American office.
Do
you not?
That's a bit controversial.
Is it?
We can get into this if you really want.
Gosh, already we're hitting
They're both
controversy.
good. They're both good. Let's just say they're both.
They're different, though. They're very different. Once you get past the first, few episodes.
I've not seen much of the US office.
You're missing a treat.
British one's
very good. You're probably one of the very few actors that was never in the American office.
I was on the first season of Modern Family.
Yeah.
That's my only claim to TV fame.
Yeah. But you know what? You keep going, TV will come calling. You'll be fine.
Eventually, I'll get my series.
Yeah, I think so.
Good.
Yeah.
You'll be all right. So Dominic and I watched the film. It's a lovely piece of work. It's a really lovely film.
Oh, it's great. Absolutely loved it.
Don't worry about any reviews other than this one. My girlfriend watched it and loved it, and that's praise indeed. Apart from the fact that she thought that the female singer in it was Joni Mitchell for the whole film.
Oh, did she?
Despite the fact I said to her, it's Joan Baez, it's not Joni Mitchell. And she went, oh, Joni Mitchell's great. And she went, yeah, but this isn't Joni Mitchell. And at the end of the film, and I was saying how Bob Dylan's still with us and Joan Baez is still with us, she goes, Joni Mitchell's still alive. I went, it's not Joni Mitchell.
Oh, dear, Tiff. It's not good.
I think
Joni
she thought...
Mitchell's alive too, so...
Yeah, well, that's true. I think she thought you played Bob Seeger.
You know what? She's in good company because a couple people, very well-known people who will remain nameless, when I said I was doing the film, said, are you doing night moves? Are you doing, Against the Wind? And I was like, not the Detroit rocker, you morons.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Did this take much convincing for you to take this role on?
No. Dylan and that period in the early 60s in the Village had a very... It was a big part of my mythological, when I moved to New York when I was in my early 20s, I was very aware of that whole period and that history, and I loved all that music. And
Sure.
And if you, it's funny, even in the 90s, if you came up kind of as a young, wannabe artist in New York, you were aware of Pete Seeger because it didn't even matter if you were really into folk music. Pete Seeger was kind of the Gandalf of the artist activists. He was sort of one of the elder statesmen of the idea of artists who campaign and get involved. And he was so I was he's a figure. He's a figure in all of our lives, and I knew less about him than I knew about Dylan, but the thing I had my hesitations only because it was maybe too precious to me, what I mean? And you sort of say, Bob, why would you, how do you do that? And our director, he was a very good shrink because playing famous people is tricky.
Yeah.
You feel... It's a little bit of a minefield,
especially if they're still alive.
Yes,
I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now Pete's not, but there was two things Jim said that I thought were really liberating. One was he said we're making a sort of a fable. We're not making a Wikipedia page entry as a film, and we want to evoke the spirit of these people. But the other thing he said was don't forget that quite a lot of people don't know this music. They don't know who Dylan is, let alone Pete Seeger. And this is a way to re-engage people with what was sort of special and inspiring and about that time and these people. And I did feel, I think Timothy and I both sort of felt like that was a worthy mission in a way, like if it got people re-engaged with what was very vital and very inspiring about that era. It was, and I think that is happening. I do think it's making people, realize that Pete Seeger is not Bob Seger, and that they should maybe go find out.
That's the mission, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know a lot about Pete Seeger, to be honest.
I didn't.
But he is. When I did my research, though, I found out he wrote "If I Had a Hammer," which I never knew.
And Where Have All the Flowers Gone? And
What a classic.
And We Shall Overcome. Which was an old spiritual, but he adapted the words to become the "We Shall Overcome" that was used in the civil rights movement. Even Martin Luther King acknowledged that Pete Seeger had sort of given the movement that song.
He's one of the nicest characters I've ever seen on screen.
That's what I texted you, wasn't it? I saw a film just before you, and I said, he is the nicest, most thoroughly decent man. He really is. He just comes across so well in this.
It's very hard to find anyone who knew him, who's still alive, who says a bad word about him. Even, Dylan, despite the sort of the controversy of the Newport thing and everything, late into his life, today, Dylan still says, like, there's nothing bad you can say about Pete Seeger.
Yeah.
He revered Pete Seeger. Yeah. And I found a letter that Dylan wrote in 1964 where he's starting to get very uncomfortable with what's happening to him.
Yeah.
And he writes this friend of his about how when he's feeling blue, he just puts Pete Seeger on. And he says, I listen to him because he's so good and so pure. And I want to be gentle.
Yeah.
He makes me want to be gentle. He makes me, he deeply, they had a great alliance. And I think, but it is an interesting thing. Someone who, I don't want to say he was like a priest, but because he was in his own way a radical. He was a radical. It's hard for us now to think of folk music as being like the punk rock.
Yeah, of course.
But it was what they were doing at that time was like what punk rock was for us.
It's sort of protest music, wasn't it?
It was very much protest music, and it was very, and to say the things they were saying within the music was actually controversial.
Yeah.
And it was I think sometimes about like I'm a big fan of Billy Bragg, and I think Billy is very much the Pete Seeger of Britain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he sang about working people, he sang about the struggles of working people, and was in his own way kind of punk and folk and all of it. And
he really supports like new artists and helps them out. He's got his own stage essentially. At
well, and he started Red Wedge, the whole thing about thing, and then he did that. Remember, he did that record with Wilco, the Mermaid Avenue, which is all Woody Guthrie.
That's right.
Songs. So I feel like Billy's very connected in the lineage of Pete Seeger. I think Bruce Springsteen is very much like, and he did a whole album of Pete Seeger's songs. I think there has been a baton passed down through time of that kind of the musical artists who are speaking to kind of the social condition.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
It's a lovely, lovely film. I mean, obviously, it's about Bob Dylan and then the Pete character, he's just the nicest. True or false? Did you do some kind of dentistry before taking the role on?
Well, Pete Seeger was born in 1919, and he was definitely pre-orthodontics.
Right.
He had a famously gnarly grill of teeth, twisted and snaggle-toothed and stained, and I messed around with. I know. Sometimes I don't even like talking about the thing, but suffice to say, I played ice hockey when I was a kid, and when I was in my teens, I got all my teeth broken.
Right. Nice.
So
right.
I have a lot of things, and I just took all that out.
Right.
And I built Pete.
Nice.
I built Pete in there for about 4 months. It was much easier than
You're so method. You really are.
It really is method.
You know what it isn't? It isn't. And someone said to me like, "Wow, what'd you do with your hair?" I said, "Just shave my head and thin my hair."
Yeah.
It's so method. No, it's not. It's just I'm lazy, and I don't like the time spent getting ready. I'd rather just be stuck with it for 4 months.
That Hulk put you off. No more makeup change.
Exactly.
10 minutes in and out, a little bit of powder, I'm fine.
Yeah, I saw these things like Colin Farrell talking proudly about 7 hours in the makeup chair, and I'm like, F off, man. That's no way.
What a way
no
to
way.
die.
Not at this point in my life.
It's never 7 hours. I'd never believe it's 7 hours.
I think he's looking for extra credit.
They've got it down to 2 hours.
He's
max.
looking for extra credit.
Yeah, of course.
But actually, joking aside, Timothy, at one point they said, we want to put up a time lapse thing for social about you becoming Bob Dylan. He looked at me and said, what do you think of that? I said, absolutely not. Like Timothy really resisted in a way I thought was very mature, kind of turning it into a Halloween costume. You know what I mean? He really got deeply immersed in it. And I think you feel that coming through it. Nobody's Bob Dylan, but Bob Dylan, and nobody's Pete Seeger, but Pete Seeger or Joan Baez.
Sure.
But I think you have to sit within a thing and try to stay within it. And I think Timothy really resisted the idea of imitation, but also of, I don't know, trying to let everybody know about his transformation. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if you guys, I remember seeing Raging Bull, you know what I mean? And the impact it had on me when he's a prize fighter, he's in all this great shit, and then suddenly he weighs 60 pounds, he's 60 pounds heavier, and you're just, but the shock of it, the actual shock of, say, that can't be him, you know what I mean? But it wasn't unpacked for you it wasn't like you watched a featurette about how De Niro ate his way through. It's just
7 hours in the chair.
Yeah, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I want the magic trick of it, and I think that Timothy's been beautifully restrained about his about not unpack, which is very Dylan-like, to be honest, because Dylan was sort of the North Star of the artist who said, don't ask me to tell you what it means.
Yeah.
Like you decide what it means,
Exactly.
which I admire a lot. But I also admire Jim. You sort of said it. I think there have been good biopics. But Jim was totally disinterested in assessing the whole life of Bob Dylan. He really wanted to just look at this moment in time where this emergent talent was colliding with these other people. And it does a really interesting thing, doesn't it? Because it's there's no plot to the film at all. It's like an immersion. It's like an immersion in this couple-year period.
Yeah,
and you get this feeling I kind of equate it to what I loved about Peter Jackson's Beatles documentary, Get Back. Did you see that?
It's great.
Slightly obsessed.
Oh, yeah.
That had the wildest effect on me, which is you get this weird feeling that you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Because by spending that much time in the boring details of it, you get this weird feeling like it's a memory.
He put it on.
I was obsessed with it.
He watched it so much, he had it on in the house and would just be walking around the house so he could hear the Beatles in another room.
Yeah.
And it was,
I was amazed.
I think he convinced himself he was there.
I was John Lennon for a bit. I've seen it 3 times all the way through. It's just
I got quite
incredible.
obsessed with it because it does the very fact of the immersion makes you feel in some sense that you've shared the experience.
Definitely.
But the thing, it's the interesting thing is a lot of times you realize that we have this tendency to take stories and we reduce them. Like we say, the Beatles broke up because of this or that. And one of the things I loved about Get Back was that because of the time spent, what he really did was make you realize you spent so much time with them as you could see them as individuals, not as the Beatles, but you could see what George is frustrated with. You could see what John's dynamics with Yoko were and what Paul's response was. And what you actually come away with is, I don't want the Beatles to break up, but I actually can see that they need to.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
can see that as people, they're 30 years old. They need to grow up and move on from each other. They're ready to move on from each other. And there's something very deep in that to me because not everything is going to last forever.
That's it, yeah.
And I feel like Jim, in this film, that's sort of what he was interested in, is there was this very intensive moment of this flowering of young people and then this elder statesman, Pete Seeger, advancing this idea that music can change the world. And then at a certain point, Dylan, his musical ambitions were going in another direction.
Yeah.
And they end up on different paths, and it's got this poignancy. You want it to hold together.
Yeah.
But nobody's the villain.
Yeah, no,
you know?
absolutely.
Nobody's the villain. Just like Paul is not the villain and George is not. You know, nobody.
Yeah.
It just needs to go. It's people who need to go their own way for different reasons.
It's a lovely film. It's a lovely slice of Bob Dylan's time.
It really is so atmospheric.
As you were saying, like with the no storyline, but it's just there. It is. It is called A Complete Unknown. Everybody go and see it. Whether you love Bob Dylan or don't know anything about Bob Dylan, it makes never mind. You can absolutely enjoy this lovely piece. And lovely to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
We've weirdly talked about the film for the whole interview.
We never
have
do
to
that.
Let you go.
We
I
never
haven't
do
asked
that.
you about flying. I'll talk to you off the air. But lovely to see you, and come back anytime you like.
Thanks,
ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ed Norton.
Yeah.
Radio. The Chris Moyles Show.